Thank you, Lou, and good morning to anyone who's joining us today, wherever or whenever you might be doing so from. Today, I am going to give you a short introduction to the Walk Japan Shikoku Temple Pilgrimage Tour. And before I do that, please allow me to introduce myself. My name is Ben Corbett. I'm 43. I was born and raised in the UK, as well as in France and the island of Malta. I've been a resident of Japan for going on 20 years now, and I began leading tours with Walk Japan in 2013, my first one being with Lou on the Nakasendo Way. Since then, I've had the chance to travel all over Japan with the company. And most recently, I joined the operations team full-time back in 2018. So the subject of today's talk then will be the Shikoku Temple Pilgrimage. And here is a map taken from the Walk Japan website showing you an outline of the itinerary. So it's an 11-day tour beginning in the city of Tokushima, which is over on the right-hand side there, marked with an A. And it wends its way around mostly the eastern side of the island before heading to the northwestern area and then back again to the north coast to the city of Takamatsu, which is the finishing point. And we walk a total distance of just over 70 kilometers during this time, with a total elevation gain of about 3,660 meters, which I think is about 120 meters short of a total sea to summit climb of Mount Fuji. We visit 23 of the 88 temples that make up the entire pilgrimage. And during this time, we have dedicated transport in the form of a 18-seater small bus. And that's with us every day from day 3 of the tour to day 10. And the bus is a very, very useful accessory to the tour. It allows us to carry our baggage with us and be picked up or dropped off should needs be. The tour includes breakfasts and dinners. Most days we take our lunches outdoors if the weather permits, having bought provisions from a local shop or perhaps making use of local restaurants. So again, breakfasts and dinners are included in the price, but each day we will be buying our own lunches. So I'd like to begin with an introduction to the island itself, its regions, geography, and the climate, and give you a very brief history of the island and its relation to the rest of the country, and then have a look at some of the local festivals, foods, and a few other attractions. Here is a map of the regions of Japan. So starting in the northeast in red, there's the island of Hokkaido, and traveling south through Tohoku to Kanto, which is where the capital city of Tokyo, or to give it its previous name, Edo, is situated. Heading west through Chubu, you arrive in the region of Kansai, and this is where the ancient capitals of Kyoto and Nara are located, as well as the mercantile city of Osaka. And heading further west through Chugoku, you reach the island of Kyushu, which is where I live. On the furthest westernmost tip, there's a city called Nagasaki. And the island that we're interested in today is the island of Shikoku, situated there between Kyushu and Kansai. The islands of Okinawa haven't slipped their moorings and drifted eastwards. They are still situated where they've always been, between the island of Taiwan and Kyushu. And the name Shikoku, written here in Chinese characters, basically means 4 lands or 4 kingdoms, Shikoku. And this topographical map of the island gives you some idea to where the mountains are situated. You see the central area that's marked in brown or orange are where the two highest peaks, Ishizuchi and Tsurugi-san, are located. And the pilgrimage itself is mostly located on these areas around the inland seashore or the narrow stretches of land between the Pacific Ocean and the mountains themselves. Now, the two main rivers of Shikoku are the Shimanto River, which is down there in the southwest. It's one of the few large rivers in Japan that's not dammed along any of its course. And the other river that we cross a number of times during our pilgrimage is the Yoshino River. Here's a couple of views of the Yoshino River. This one is taken from day 3. So you can see looking northwards across the plain, the river flows eastwards out towards Tokushima. And this is a very good example of the topography of most of the Japanese archipelago. You can see these very densely packed areas of urban sprawl, also intermingled with farmland. And beyond them, these heavily forested, steep mountain slopes. Here's another view of the same river, this time from the Oboke-Koboke area, up in the central Iya Valley region, which we visit during the middle of our trip. And if you look at the buildings in the distance there and the bridge, it gives you some perspective as to the size of the river. And if you note the tree line, you can see just how high this river rises during the rainy season period and the typhoon periods. It's also a very popular river for rafting in the summer months. And this is taken from an area where we stopped for lunch before heading up to the Iya River, the Iya Valley on day 6. Beautiful clear waters of the Yoshino River. And here are two examples of the difference in precipitation levels on the north of the island compared to the south of the island. If you look at the graph on the left, taken from the city of Takamatsu on the north inland seacoast, and compare it to the one on the right, which is from Kochi on the Pacific coast, you'll see that the levels of precipitation in the months of June and July are much, much greater, increasing even more so in September. And these relate to the Japanese monsoon season, which again takes place in the months of June and July. And again, the typhoon season, which primarily strikes Japan during the month of September. The most popular seasons for pilgrimage are the spring months between March and May, and again in autumn from the end of September through till November. It's said that in spring, the island of Shikoku comes alive with the bells of pilgrims. So Shikoku is the smallest of Japan's 4 main islands. It's got a population of roughly 3.6 million. The largest city being Matsuyama, which is on the northwest coast there on the inland sea, has a population of just over 500,000. And it's divided now into 4 prefectures. So modern day Tokushima on the right-hand side in yellow is where we start our tour. Previously, it was known as Awa. And then heading south, we find Kochi Prefecture, which used to be called the Tosa domain. Besides that is Ehime Prefecture, which used to be called Iyo. And the smallest of the 4, Kagawa, was previously referred to as Sanuki. So historically speaking, Shikoku has often been regarded as somewhat of a backwater, acting as a place of exile for many aristocrats, especially during the early Asuka and Heian periods, which dated from the 4th to the late 12th centuries. And indeed, the father of the priest Kukai, who is the founder of the pilgrimage, was one such person to suffer this fate. So prior to the Meiji Restoration of 1868, the current prefectures went under these names. So if you hear me perhaps referring to places in their old names, they refer to the modern day prefectures. And here's a map of the island in its entirety with the temples numbered from 1 to 88. And again, the island's divided into 4 prefectures. And these prefectures in the pilgrimage relate to different stages of spiritual awakening. So if I can draw your attention first to Tokushima prefecture on the right-hand side, this is known as the dojo, or the place of practice, the dojo of awakening. And Kochi prefecture is the dojo of ascetic training. Next along the pilgrimage route is Ehime, which is referred to as the place of enlightenment. And finally, upon reaching Kagawa, pilgrims are said to enter into the dojo of nirvana. And so the island is seen perhaps as part of a Buddhist mandala, or a representation of the universe through which the pilgrims travel during meditation, perhaps, or in this case, during a physical pilgrimage. And the number 88 perhaps refers to a Buddhist text. This one is called the 88 Buddha's Great Repentance text. And this is given as perhaps one reason for the number 88, but there is no actual definitive reason as to why there are fewer, or there aren't fewer or more temples. Another reason given for Temple 1 being where it is its proximity to the Japanese island of Honshu, the mainland, if you like, where the cities of Osaka and Kyoto are located. So it's said that this would be the entry point through which most of the pilgrims in the past would have traveled. And also its proximity to the mountain temple complex of Mount Koya that Kukai founded. So a few other notable historical figures from Shikoku include the Taira clan, and we'll talk about them a little bit later on in detail when we get to the Iya Valley. And other characters include Nakahama Manjiro and Sakamoto Ryoma. These were 2 samurai who belonged to the Tosa domain, and they played important roles in the overthrow of the Tokugawa shogunate. So the Tokugawa family, who had ruled Japan from the early 1600s to the mid to late 19th century, were overthrown, and these 2 gentlemen played a large part in what became the end of feudalism and the ushering in of the modern Japanese period. So I'd like to share with you too now some famous scenes from the late Edo period. These are woodblock prints that were created by an very famous artist called Hiroshige. And there's one for each of the provinces, which numbered 60 at the time around Japan. These 4 relate to the provinces of Shikoku. The first one is our province. So this is Tokushima prefecture. And this famous view of the Naruto whirlpools. And Tokushima prefecture is also famous for its summer Obon. This is a Buddhist festival of the dead, dancing. This is called the Awa Odori, when hundreds of people take part dancing through the streets of Tokushima city to the sound of traditional music. There's a very famous song that they sing on the way, which translates as "The dancers are fools, the watchers are fools, both fools alike, so why not dance?" And on the right-hand side, there's a flavor of Tokushima, which is very well known throughout Japan. This is sudachi, a sort of lime that you find as an accompaniment with many dishes in Shikoku. Now, traveling into Kochi Prefecture, or the former province of Tosa, we have this lovely view of bonito fishermen. So fishing has always been a mainstay of that prefecture, situated as it is on the Pacific coast. And there's a lovely close-up of these fishermen performing what is called in Japanese ipponzuri, so single line fishing. And you can see these gentlemen tossing in live bait in order to attract these large bonito tuna fish. And there's a picture on the left there of the aforementioned katsuo. So this is a flavor that you'll be able to enjoy when we reach Kochi Prefecture. And on the right-hand side there is this image of a famous Tosa Inu, these fighting sumo dogs. This one dressed as a grand sumo champion. And from the peaceful shores of the inland sea in Ehime Prefecture, we have a view of Saijo, this small fishing port castle town in Iyo province, with a lovely flock of auspicious cranes flying overhead. And Ehime Prefecture is well known for its mikan, these small mandarin oranges, which come in many sizes, many different forms, with their own character. You can see there, I think his name is Mikan. And on the left is the famous Dogo Onsen. Dogo Onsen is situated in one of the suburbs of Matsuyama City, and we stay here for 2 nights and get the chance ourselves to wander out in yukata, such as the gentleman now on the left are doing, and to enjoy the beautiful architecture and hot baths of this famous onsen town. And here's a view from Sanuki province, a current-day Kagawa prefecture, of some Edo period travelers coming up over the hill. And in the distance, clinging to the sides of Mount Zozu, is the grand shrine of Kotohira. The chochin, the lantern on the right there, has the crest, if you like, of the Konpira-san shrine complex that we get to visit also on the days that we stay there. And on the left, the famous Sanuki udon, these wheat-based udon that are the culinary pride and joy of the prefecture of Kagawa. Now, next, I'd like to introduce you to some of the founding figures of the Shikoku Pilgrimage and to the famous monk Kukai and Shingon Buddhism that he established here in Japan. So Buddhism is said to have arrived in Japan officially in the mid-6th century, having made its way along the Silk Road from India through China into Korea, from where a diplomatic mission was supposedly sent bearing gifts that included an image of the historical Buddha Shakyamuni, as well as ritual banners and sutras and other such implements. And it's around this time that figures such as this smiling gentleman, known as Enno Gyoja, began to appear in the records. Enno Gyoja is said to have lived 100 years or so before Kukai was born, and he was the progenitor or the founder, if you like, of what later became called the Shugendo sect, these sects of Buddhist monks who mixed the indigenous Shinto religion with aspects of Taoism and shamanism, and had a fondness for climbing mountains and practicing strict austerities under waterfalls and such. And there's a lovely picture there of his shoes, his Geta sandals that he said to have climbed all these mountains in. Many of the temples in Shikoku that are associated with Kukai and the 88 Temple Pilgrimage are said to have been initially founded by Enno Gyoja and a couple of other characters also, one other who is named Gyoki. There's another picture of Enno Gyoja. He was also said to have been banished from the capital, Nara, and sent to the hinterlands of Shikoku for a period. And another key figure in the pilgrimage, who is said to have been the actual true first pilgrim, is a character called Emon Saburo. You can see him here on the right-hand side. So the story goes he was the wealthiest man in Shikoku and alive at the same time as Kukai. One day, a mendicant monk visited his house and asked for alms to be given, a small donation to be given. And Emon Saburo took umbrage at this and chased Kukai away. And Kukai returned apparently 3 days in a row. And on the third row, he was struck about his person by Emon Saburo, breaking Kukai's begging bowl into 8 pieces. Subsequently, Emon Saburo's 8 children died one by one, and Emon Saburo realized just who this person that he chased away had been, and went out. You can see him here, this lovely image of him leaving his wife, heading out to try and catch up with Kukai, to apologize, to repent. And he's said to have done so 20 times around the island, traveling clockwise, searching for Kukai, never managing to find him, until the day he thought he might perhaps be able to do so if he turned around and headed anti-clockwise. And it said that in doing this, he caught up with Kukai eventually between temples 11 and 12, and Kukai absolved him of his sins, and he subsequently died on that spot. But again, he's said to be the first true pilgrim, having initially undertaken the pilgrimage in a clockwise fashion, which is what most people do. He then decided to do it in an anti-clockwise fashion, which is not unheard of, but quite unusual. There's an image here of Emon Saburo catching up with Kukai below the temple number 12 on the left there. And the main character then of the Shikoku narrative is a man of many names, with many, many, many legends attributed to him, all of which I'm afraid I do not have time to share with you today. But we do have time for a short introduction to his life. So let's start at the beginning with this lovely depiction of the baby Saeki no Mao, as he was called, with his mother, Lady Tamayori. So he was born into an aristocratic family in 774, and he was given the name Saeki no Mao by his parents. Mao apparently translates as true fish. And he was also referred to by his parents as Totomono, precious thing. And his family home was said to have been built on the site of Zensuji, which is temple number 5. And it's a temple that we visit in the later stages of our pilgrimage tour. Here's a picture of the roofs of Zensuji Temple. And on the right-hand side, these lovely giant camphor trees, which Kukai is said to have referred to fondly in his biography. He was also referred to as The Daishi, if you hear people referring to someone as Odaishi-sama, they are referring to Kukai. And it was a name that was given to him posthumously by one of the later Japanese emperors, and means great teacher. In his childhood, he was supposed to have leapt from a peak not far from his home in Zensuji. And on his way down, he is supposed to have declared, "I make a vow to devote myself to Buddhahood. If I'm not capable of this, then I do not deserve my existence." And he did actually not make it all the way down. He was intercepted by the Bodhisattva Kannon, who was apparently sent herself by the Buddha Amida to bring him gently down to earth and to allow him to go on with his goal of attaining these lofty values. Later on in life, around the age of 15, he left Shikoku, or rather he was sent away to study Chinese classics and Chinese language in the capital of Nara. And at 18, he's said to have entered university to study the Confucian curriculum, which all young men of good breeding were expected to do at the time, with a view to becoming a career bureaucrat in the political system that governed the country at the time. And despite his diligent efforts, this prospect didn't really appeal to him. So he is said to have decided to quit his Confucian studies, but still carry on pursuing his Buddhist studies. So his leaving this university coincided with him meeting an elderly Japanese Buddhist priest who introduced him to a Buddhist scripture that was to play a very, very important part in his life from then on. The scripture was called the Kokuzo Gumonji no Ho, and it said that if one recites this sutra, this Japanese Buddhist text, 1,000,000 times, it would afford the person reciting it, according to the proper methods, the memory and the ability to absorb anything they read and to memorize any text, however complicated or however difficult it was. And subsequently, he traveled around the country, sort of meditating in the mountains, engaging in his own short pilgrimages, until eventually he found himself down on the Pacific coast of Shikoku in an area called Muroto. And he's said to have meditated in a cave facing the Pacific Ocean for somewhere between 50 perhaps to 100 days, reciting this Gumonji Ho mantra until he had his enlightenment experience. This enlightenment experience is said to have involved the Bodhisattva Kokuzo in the form of the morning star or Venus, who flew into his mouth upon the 1,000,000th recitation of the Gumonji Ho. So these are images taken from the southern coast of Shikoku, and it's possible if you get up early enough to go and enjoy this same view of the sunrise before we head out for the day's walk. There's an image of Kokuzo Bodhisattva. And here are two Chinese characters which make up the name Kukai. So there's a few different stories relating as to when and where he decided to start using this name. But the common story accepted by most people is that it relates to the view of the ocean and the sky he experienced in Muroto. So ku there, the character of a ku means sky or empty, and kai as sea. And it's often translated as infinite or endless ocean, an endless ocean of wisdom, perhaps in the Buddhist sense. Kukai's adventures later saw him heading to China as part of an official government mission, where he was supposed to spend 20 years, but ended up, in fact, only spending 2 years, during which, among many, many, many other things, he was invested with the clothes and the accoutrements of the 8th patriarch of Shingon Buddhism. Subsequently, he returned to Japan. Before doing so, he stood on the shores of the East China coast, and through this Vajra, you can see him clasping this esoteric instrument to his chest. This is called a Vajra. And there's a lovely depiction of him standing there on the coast, throwing it, it would have been eastwards, towards the archipelago of Japan. And upon his return to Japan, he's said to have sought out the landing place of this Vajra, and eventually ended up in the mountains of Koyasan, where he met a local deity in the form of a hunter with his black and white dogs, who led him to a giant koyamaki. It's a type of pine tree that you get here in Japan, in which he found the aforementioned Vajra. Koyasan is where Kukai founded his mountain complex of temples and Buddhist universities. And for many people, a trip to Koyasan precedes the trip to the Shikoku Pilgrimage. And also many people, upon completion of the visit to the 88 temples, will return to Koyasan in order to give thanks to Kukai. The Koyasan is where Kukai is said to be resting in eternal meditation. There's his mausoleum on the right-hand side. And he's supposedly awaiting the return of the Buddha of the future, Maitreya, who is supposed to return to Earth in about 5.6 billion years' time. A little while to wait. The esoteric school that he founded venerates many Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, along with characters known as wisdom kings. And it's extremely rich in imagery, statuary, and ceremony. Some of the central objects and symbols of worship and meditation in the Shingon school are this RG, this R seed syllable mandala, and the matrix and womb realm mandalas depicted here in iconographic and Sanskrit forms. Another central aspect of Shingon ceremony includes the Goma fire ritual, and this has its roots in ancient Vedic Indian traditions. Now then, to get back to the pilgrimage itself, I'd like to show you a few customs and traditions related to the pilgrimage itself. Here is an image of 2 traditional pilgrims, or Henro, as they're referred to. The characters on the left-hand side from top to bottom read Shikoku Henro, and the pilgrimage itself is often sometimes referred to as the Henro. So these 2 pilgrims sat under a pine tree, relaxing after what was probably quite a hike up on the side of a mountain, in their traditional pilgrim wear include the following: the sugegasa, which is this woven hat you can see on the left, and the kongo zue, this staff that represents the physical embodiment of Kukai, or Kobo Daishi. written upon the hat on the left-hand side, you can just make it out, are these 4 characters. They read Dogyo Ninin. The Dogyo Ninin roughly translates to 2 traveling together. The 2 being the pilgrim and Kukai by his side or her side. And around the hat are written the Shiku no Satori, these 4 phrases of enlightenment. So the first reads, being lost is due to the 3 worlds of desire. The second, with enlightenment, 10,000 skies will appear. Followed by, originally there is no east or west. And then, why is there a north or south? So these phrases are for the pilgrim to contemplate during his travels around the temples. And there are many rules of etiquette related to the staff especially. So again, it symbolizes the embodiment of Saint Kukai himself. So it's to be treated with the utmost respect. And some of these rules include when you stop to rest, make sure you take care of the staff. Make sure you prop it up respectfully. When you reach your place of stay, wash the end of the staff and place it in the tokonoma, the tokonoma being the place in a Japanese traditional house where flowers and calligraphy is often displayed. Lift it while crossing bridges. This relates to the belief that Kobo Daishi, Kukai, might be sleeping under the bridge, so as not to wake him up. Make sure you lift your staff as you cross. And as the staff phrase, as it will inevitably do, do not cut it with a knife. Using a stone or other blunt instrument is allowed. And I found some old photos of pilgrims taking care of their staff at the end of the day. These Japanese phrases from the top read, Yado ni tsuitara mazu tsue o arai. So as soon as you reach your lodgings, make sure to wash your staff. And the one below that reads, tsue no tsugi jibun no ashi o arau. So once you wash your staff, wash your own feet. And another main piece of the pilgrimage equipment is this hakui, this white overcoat, here embellished with Sanskrit character and the mantra to Kobo Daishi. The script in the middle of the hakui reads Namu Daishi Henro Kongo. This is a phrase you hear repeated again and again and again every day during the pilgrimage. It means hail to the great teacher. And there's also a small bag which is used to carry incense, candles, and prayer books. And also many people carry a tenugui, a cloth, like the one you see on the right-hand side there. This one printed with the Buddhist Heart Sutra. So the color white obviously represents purity, but it also, especially in East Asia, represents death also. It's related to funerary rites. And the idea is that a pilgrim undertakes a pilgrimage in 2 steps, basically. The first step is giving up worldly concerns. So separating yourself from your mundane life and engaging in this spiritual pursuit. And the idea also exists, especially in the past, that while climbing over these treacherous mountains and along these barren coastlines, that you might succumb to injury or disease and subsequently pass away from your afflictions. And should that happen, you would be ready to be buried in your funeral clothes, and the staff would often act as a grave marker. There's something else that most pilgrims carry, is a small book called a nokkyocho, and this is my nokkyocho, which here has some stamps from, I think one is from Mount Koya, and another one is from a temple in another part of Japan. But they're the same in Shikoku. Each temple that you visit, there will be a small office where the priest, or perhaps the priest's wife, or an acolyte will be available to pen this beautiful calligraphic representation of the temple's name, the date, and perhaps a mantra associated to the Buddha of that temple. And also to stamp the book with these red stamps. So each of these are different for each temple. And here's an example of one of these books that's been stamped by a pilgrim who has made the pilgrimage over 100 times. So initially you get your book written in once with the black ink, and subsequently you only receive the red stamps. Almost illegible here. Another item that's carried in the pilgrim's bag are these osame fuda. These are name slips. More recently, they've become available in English. You can see the one in the middle there, which I think was made to cater to the ever-increasing numbers of foreign visitors to Shikoku. And each day, before you set out on your pilgrimage route, you fill it in with your details, the date, and a wish, perhaps, that you might have for Kobo Daishi. And these slips are color-coded. So depending on the number of times you've made the pilgrimage, you're entitled to use different colored slips. So for beginners, there are 1 to 4 times these white slips are used, and then green, red, silver, gold. And if you undertake the pilgrimage more than 100 times, you're able to commission these beautiful woven brocade osame fuda. And the one on the right was given to me by a gentleman from Hiroshima City who wouldn't tell me the exact number of times he'd undertaken the pilgrimage, but had nonetheless definitely done so at least 100 times. And here's the box you can see outside the temple into which people place these before praying. And another thing many people carry, of course, in their bag are incense sticks. So there's a lot of different small points of etiquette related to lighting the candles and incense when you visit a temple. One thing to notice here is that in Shikoku, people usually offer 3 sticks of incense there. So there's a number of different reasons given. One I was told was a stick each for the past, the present, and the future. This is a small prayer book containing the Heart Sutra, to give it its full name, the Sutra of the Heart of the Great Perfection of Wisdom. And this is probably the most widely known and the most widely chanted sutra in the whole of Japan. It's relatively short, relatively easy to recite, and it's a sound that you become familiar with every day as the pilgrimage goes on. And I usually, during the pilgrimage, for the first few days, aid or guide people who wish to participate in doing so with a translation or a phonetic example in English of this Heart Sutra. So, Kukai, again, Kobo Daishi is credited with many, many miracles and many, many feats, of which we simply do not have time to go through today. The 11-day tour gives us plenty of time to delve into all of these stories and to look into the customs more deeply. But one example here is the legend that relates to the creation of one of Japan's 2 phonetic writing systems. This one is called hiragana, the other being katakana. And these systems were created to transliterate the very complicated, often illegible Chinese characters into a form that the less educated would be able to read or recite. And this one in particular is very special. It's called the Iroha, and it's a poem in the form of a palindrome. So each of the hiragana characters is used only once, and it's a poem that all Japanese children learn in their early educational childhood. And it translates as thus: although its scent still lingers on, the form of a flower has scattered away. For whom will the glory of this world remain unchanged? Arriving today at the yonder side of the deep mountains of evanescent existence, we shall never allow ourselves to drift away, intoxicated in the world of shallow dreams. So I'm not sure that children learn the depth of this meaning. They just learn the phonetic reading. But it is an example again of one of these legends related to Kobo Daishi. Then, if you've never visited a temple before and would like to participate in the different aspects of prayer, there's a number of things one does before reciting these sutras. The first, of course, is to pass through the gate of the temple. And here's a picture of a pilgrim doing so on the left-hand side. So we start by entering the temple on the left-hand side of the gate. And then we arrive at a wash basin where we perform ablutions, rinse your mouth and wash your hands. This is where that towel comes into use. And then perhaps ring the temple bell to announce your arrival. Then subsequently you approach the temple buildings and perhaps offer a few coins to the offertory box. You put your osame fuda into the boxes that are besides the temple doors, and then you go through the process of reciting the sutras, or the prayers, the Buddhist prayers. And there are different ones for each of the different Buddhist deities enshrined inside, and also different prayers to Kobo Daishi himself. Here's an example of the layout of a typical temple complex in Shikoku. So when you approach the temple, you'll find these boxes, and these are carved granite stands in which you place your tsue, your staff. Now, after doing so, you offer some incense. Here is the incense burner. Then there's this area to light candles before adding your slip to the box with those of other pilgrims. And you'll see here there's two buildings. The one on the left houses the main Buddhist deity. It's called the Hondo. And the building on the right is called the Daishido. So this building is dedicated to a statue, an image of Kobo Daishi himself. And so the rituals involved at the temple are repeated twice. So, for example, on day one, we visit 6 temples, and you very quickly become familiar with these aspects of pilgrimage and the sounds and smells of the incense and the sutras being recited. Right, next then, I'd like to take you on a day-by-day walkthrough of Walk Japan's Shikoku Temple Pilgrimage itinerary. And this will include duration and distances, elevation numbers taken from the Walk Japan website. So if you'd like to review these perhaps at a more leisurely pace, please do so by having a look at the Walk Japan Shikoku Temple Pilgrimage website page. The main point of this next step in the presentation is to give people an idea of the terrain and the walking conditions, as well as a few sites and an introduction to a few other stories related to some of the main temples. So day one begins in Tokushima, and it's not a walking day. We meet in the evening at 6 p.m. of our hotel and head out for dinner, where we get a chance to meet and greet each other and go over a few salient points relating to the itinerary. Day two is our first walking day, and today we visit 6 temples. So I'd like you to perhaps take notice of the distances and elevation gain numbers written on the left-hand side of your screen there in the grey box, and also at the graph at the bottom, which gives you an idea of the terrain that we'll be facing that day. So this day, for example, the total gain is only 100 meters. We walk 10.6 kilometers and we visit 6 temples. And it's mentioned there that on this day, our luggage is transferred separately in a private vehicle. So we send it from our hotel in the morning using a local courier service. And our luggage, our main luggage, reaches us in the evening at our lodgings. So during the day, all we take with us are a small day pack, for example, and other things like a water bottle, hat, and we generally try to travel as lightly as possible. So day one, then we're in Tokushima Prefecture, and we visit temples 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So we are in the awakening stage of our pilgrimage. Now we leave the hotel and travel a very short distance by train to the town of Bando. And upon alighting, we see these lovely signs, these modern signs, giving us the distance and direction to the next temple. So this is Temple 1. And Temple 1, most people refer to the temples by their numbers, is where you can pick up, should you wish to do so, elements of the traditional pilgrimage uniform. So you could perhaps pick up a hakui jacket, the segasa hat, or perhaps you might also want to pick up a staff. The gentleman on the left here I've used as an example of a perfectly well-dressed modern day pilgrim. So you can see here he's got some very comfortable lightweight walking shoes on. He's dressed for the late April sunshine, the small day pack, a hat, a towel. I'm sure he had a water bottle in his day pack also. And he's carrying, I think he's chosen there, a prayer book and a small box that contains candles and incense. So you might want to go somewhere in between these two. So Temple 1, we pass through the Gate of Awakening, the Hoshinmon, into Temple 1, Ryozenji. And this is the first place where, should you wish to do so, you can engage in the act of pilgrimage. So you can light your candles and incense, and perhaps also have your first go at reciting the Hanya Shingyo, the Heart Sutra. And this is also where you'll probably first meet a number of Japanese pilgrims. After Temple 1, it's a short walk to Temple 2, Gokurakuji, then onwards to Temple 3, Konsenji, which is where we stop for lunch. Often beneath this giant cedar tree there, which you might want to pray to for longevity. After lunch, we carry on sort of along back lanes, besides small farm gardens through the back streets of Bando towards Temple 4, Dainichi-ji. If you hear the suffix ji after all of these temple names, it means temple. So Dainichi temple, Dainichi ji. Then onwards to temple number 5, Jizoji. So a short walk here. It's only 1.5 kilometers between these two temples. On the way, perhaps meeting pilgrims such as this gentleman. Through citrus orchards and along a few slightly muddy trails, if there's been a bit of rain. The photo on the right there is actually the most challenging part of today's walk. And we eventually arrive at Temple 5, Jizoji, where we're met by local taxis which take us to our lodgings and the final temple of the day, Temple 6, Anrakuji. So again, at each of these temples, you may, if you like, choose to participate in the recitation and the candle lighting, but it's not expected at all to do so. Usually half of the participants take part and the other half spend a little bit more time wandering around, taking things in. At the end of this day, though, the lodgings are in a shukubo. This is a temple lodging for pilgrims. And here is an example of the rooms that we stay in that night. So traditional Japanese tatami rooms, in which there are bedding somewhere hidden in a cupboard that's taken out just before bedtime. And you'll also find a nice cup of tea and biscuits waiting for you, as well as a yukata. On the left there at the bottom is a Japanese bathing gown with a towel and a belt, which you take with you when you enjoy the evening bath. So here's a couple of photos of traditional pilgrims sleeping in what looks like rather cramped conditions. This isn't the case with our tour accommodations, so you will have your own rooms. And tonight's temple features some very special onsen baths. These onsen baths were historically brought forth when Kukai plunged his staff into the ground. There's a lovely picture just outside the temple of him doing so, and the local kami, the local Shinto gods, enjoying the beneficial waters that he brought forth. And dinner on day one is shojin yori. So traditionally, shojin yori is vegetarian food. And here you could see an example. There's some tempura, some fruit, a few vinegar dishes, some vegetarian sashimi. And after day two's relatively flat, easygoing itinerary, we begin day 3, which is the start of a very different type of scenery. It's our first venture into the mountainous sections of the pilgrimage. So we begin in the morning, a short transit by our dedicated bus, which joins us from this day. We load our luggage into the bus and then we head to Temple 11, which is situated here, 11 and 12. The Temple 11, Fujidera, is the Wisteria well temple. This is actually, it's not a Shingon temple, but a Rinzai Zen temple. And it takes its name from the wisterias that are planted all around. And the trails today are very much like the one you can see here in this photo. They're wide and very well maintained, albeit somewhat uneven. We begin in the morning on the first uphill section along these very well maintained flights of steps and through cedar forest and deciduous mixed forest. Very lovely trails today, and we're guided all the way by these signs that are carved in stone. Past images of the protective deity Jizo, this bodhisattva who's seen as a guardian of travels. Eventually reaching a section known as Henro Korogashi. So this is a Henro tumbler section, which was mentioned in some of the old guidebooks as being extremely dangerous and hazardous, but in fact is not either of those. You can see this model on the left here gives you an example of just how well maintained these trails are, despite their names. Eventually, we reach the top of this pass where there's a lovely statue of Kobo Daishi waiting beneath a huge cedar tree at the Ippon Sugi-an, where we stop for lunch, another picnic lunch, before carrying on downhill. So this is the most, I'd say the most challenging section of downhill on day 3. Again, with this little statue of Jizo there, protecting the pilgrims on their way down. Eventually, we pop out in this little rural hamlet with lovely views of the mountains. Down to the valley floor, where we begin our final ascent up through another cedar forest to Temple 12, Shosanji. And Shosanji is a lovely story related to the name of this temple, and it goes back to a time when the local valley was being ravaged by a dragon, and Kukai was called upon to come and pacify it and imprison it in a cave in the mountain just above the temple itself. There's a beautiful large Japanese cryptomeria trees in the grounds of this temple. And on the way down to our lodgings that evening, after visiting the temple, we stopped for a very brief look at the statue of Kobo Daishi and Emon Saburo, who you might remember I mentioned earlier as being the original pilgrim who went searching for Kukai and eventually found him on his 21st attempt going clockwise at this spot. And it's here where Kukai absolved him of his past transgressions and where he's said to have subsequently passed away. And next to this statue, there's a giant cedar tree, which is said to have grown forth from the staff that was planted to mark his grave. This evening's lodgings are in a small town called Kamiyama Onsen. So you might have guessed by the name, there are lovely hot spring baths available at this slightly more modern lodging, as well as a lovely park next door, which has not just wisteria, but lovely flowers throughout the year. And tonight we enjoy the first of many delicious kaiseki ryori dinners. So there are a number of courses, including sashimi and what else is there? We've got some grilled meat, some vinegar dishes, tempura, and for a number of other things that will come later on. And of course, there are onsen baths available that night too. And day 4 then takes us on a completely different trip down south towards the Pacific Ocean coast. So we start in Kamiyama Onsen and we transit by bus down to Hiwasa. And it's in Hiwasa that we visit Temple 23. So only one temple today. And the last one in Tokushima Prefecture. And here it is. On the left-hand side is the first of the steps that take us up to this giant pagoda that sits above the temple. And Yakuoji is one of the most popular temples in the whole of Shikoku due to its association with the medicine Buddha. And Kobo Daishi, Kukai, is said to have visited this temple and established it essentially at the age of 42 carving the statue of the medicine Buddha himself. And the steps on the way up to the temple have a significance in their numbers. So the first set of steps number 33, and these relate to inauspicious years in a person's life. So it's said that at the age of 33, women experience their most unlucky years, their yakudoshi. And next, above those are the 42 steps, which represent the unlucky years of a man's life. And above those, there are 60 more steps, which represent the next unluckiest years in both men and women's lives. So a number of steps to reach the pagoda. But at the top, you're afforded this beautiful view out across the small town of Hiwasa towards the Pacific Ocean. And we start today's walk by heading back down those steps and picking up some lunch and crossing the train track, heading up to the castle that you can see on the right-hand side, which it's actually a modern reconstruction in ferro-concrete of the old castle. And it's from here that our walk today takes us along a section of the Shikoku no Michi. This is the Shikoku Shizen no Michi, is a natural path, an area of outstanding natural beauty that veers slightly away from the pilgrimage route at this point. So the pilgrimage route from Temple 23 to 24 is actually now a modern highway, a modern asphalted highway. So really not very pleasant to walk along. But in places, the Shikoku no Michi trail takes us along towards the cliffs of Semba with great views out to the Pacific Ocean. So here's an example of the terrain today. It's very well maintained, but there's some ups and some downs that take us to some lovely points where there's a number of shelters, one of which we will have lunch at, weather permitting. Eventually we head back down towards Hiwasa, so it's sort of a loop circuit today, back down these Ishidatami steps. And we rejoin our private bus, which then takes us a further 45 minutes to an hour to the very tip of Cape Muroto, where we stay in a hotel literally on the coast there, facing the Pacific and the morning sunrise. So this hotel has behind it a giant statue of Kobo Daishi, you can see there here, staring wistfully at tonight's dinner, which includes a lot of very, very generously sliced seafood sashimi. You can see it's bonito, skipjack tuna, sashimi, grilled fish, tempura, an absolute delight for seafood lovers this evening. And at some point in the evening before checking in, or perhaps for bedtime, we'll take you across the road and towards the evacuation point. Should there be an alarm warning of an impending tsunami, the evacuation point for our hotel is across the road, up the steps, and towards the giant statue of Kukai, with another statue of the historical Buddha there behind him. Then day 5. So again, we start today on foot. So we begin by loading our luggage into our dedicated bus, which again will follow us throughout the day. We visit 3 temples today and walk approximately 12.6 kilometers. And you can see in the morning, we have this little uphill stretch that takes us to Temple 24, then 25 and 26. And now we've entered Kochi, the prefecture or the dojo of ascetic training. So as soon as we leave the hotel, we walk along the coast through these lovely rock formations, past what was purported to be Kukai's bath, and along a section of one of Japan's geoparks. So all along the way here, there's this lovely signage in English and Japanese telling us about the geological formations and the prehistoric volcanic movements of the area. So plenty of time to stroll and take all that in as we head eventually to down here on the left-hand side, the cave, the Mikurodo cave, in which Kukai is said to have experienced his enlightenment. Then behind the cave, we head up here. You can see this little 20-minute stretch of uphill to Temple 24, Hotsu Misakiji. And this is the temple that Kukai founded when he returned to this spot at the age of 42 to dedicate a temple and an image to Kokuzo Bosatsu. So this is the bodhisattva whose mantra he recited 1,000,000 times. And from the temple, we head back downhill, and the walk, for the most part, takes us through the back streets of these small fishing villages. You can see there really is very little in the way of human habitation between these steep mountains and the Pacific Ocean that drops off very, very steeply there. Now, after about an hour and a half, very leisurely strolling through the back streets, we visit Shinshoji. This is 25, and it's a temple dedicated to seamen. And the image inside the temple is one of the Bodhisattva Jizo, and he's called the helmsman Jizo. And after visiting the temple, then we come back down the steps, and if you can see on the right-hand side, there's a red sign there that says Teishoku. So there's a small local restaurant here with a very, very wide menu of local dishes, something for everyone there. And after lunch, we carry on along to Kongo Choji. This is Temple 26. And this temple was rebuilt a number of times recently in concrete due to the fact that it was blown down so many times in typhoons that strike regularly in the month of September. It's also home to a small shrine that's dedicated to the souls of whales that were caught by whale fishermen, which was part of the economic mainstay in the past. Then onwards by bus towards tonight's lodgings. On the way, we stop off for a brief little tour of the town of Kiragawa. So this town is, it's known for its, what are they called? Nameko kabe. So these plastered walls that are built intentionally thick to prevent, again, typhoons from damaging the goods that were stored within. The most famous of which are Binchotan charcoal. So the region around this town is very remote, and the main economic activity for hundreds of years has been the production of this very high quality, high grade Binchotan charcoal. Then upon reaching tonight's lodgings, we're met by this giant effigy of a bluefin tuna, indicating perhaps what the main stay of tonight's dinner might be. Dressed here with the pilgrim's hat and a staff by his side. Again, some lovely onsen baths at tonight's lodgings. And the restaurant attached to this hotel where we have dinner is where I would highly recommend trying this local delicacy, this katsuo no wara tataki, straw grilled skipjack tuna. And day 6, then we start the day off again by a short transfer by our dedicated bus to Temple 27. So today is another day that we only visit one temple. And it's a very beautiful temple located in a mountain valley with views out over the Pacific Ocean. And you can see the entrance here. The gate on the left is the temple gate, and on the right is a gate that leads up to a Shinto shrine. Lovely gardens on the way up to the Buddhist temple. And if you have the energy or the inclination, there's an option to walk a further 20 minutes up behind the temple to visit this beautiful Shinto shrine. Shinto is the pre-Buddhist indigenous Japanese faith, surrounded by some more beautiful, magnificent cedar trees. And back down the steps again, past more pilgrims, to our bus, and we say goodbye to the Pacific Ocean before heading north into the center of the island of Shikoku, eventually reaching the Yoshino River again, and heading up into the Iya Valley. So today we stopped for lunch at one of a number of restaurants along the river here, and the udon are always highly recommended, as are the local soba. And eventually we reach the area known as the Iya Valley region. So these are the headwaters of the Yoshino River in the central region of Shikoku. And after checking into the hotel, we take a short stroll down the hill to this vine bridge. So the Iya Valley is known for a few different things, but this is probably the most famous. It's rebuilt every 6 years, if memory serves me right. And traditionally, it was made from vines gathered from the forests. Today, it is reinforced with stainless steel cables. For people who are a little bit anxious about crossing it, I always like to give this example of our innkeeper, who, upon my first trip to Shikoku, took us across the bridge in full kimono and geta sandals in the rain. So I'm sure if she can do it, then anyone else can. And after crossing the bridge, you might want to go down and enjoy the riverbank and the views up to the Oku Iya area, the deep Iya Valley region. And the Iya Valley is, it's one of the regions that survivors of the Heike clan, who I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, fled to after their defeat at the hands of their arch enemy, the Minamoto clan, or the Genji clan. So here are the family crests of the Minamoto and the Taira, the Genji, or the Heike, as they're alternatively known. This famous scene of Yoshitsune leaping onto the Heike ship. And this great scene from the Battle of Dan no Ura. So Dan no Ura was this epic battle that took place in 1185. And it saw these two fleets engage with one another in the Shimonoseki Strait, which is just west of Shikoku. And the Heike eventually were defeated by their enemies, and the survivors fled to many places, it's said, around Japan, one of them being the Iya Valley. This lovely view of the ghosts of the vanquished Heike there, transmogrified into crabs, haunting the figures of Yoshitsune and his attendant Benkei. So after our visit to the bridge, we head back to the hotel and check in, and there are some absolutely fantastic hot spring onsen baths at the hotel tonight, a number of indoor and outdoor baths available. Before dinner, which is a veritable feast of local foods that include, perhaps first for some freshwater sashimi is on the menu, as well as on the left there, these dango, dengo mashi, sweet potato tofu, slathered in miso and grilled over charcoal. Some lovely local sake perhaps also. And another bath before bed, I'm sure. Then day 7, then we head westwards towards Ehime Prefecture. And we leave the Iya Valley and travel to Yasakaji after a 3.5-hour transit along the north motorway. So the temples that we eventually reach are over here in the Dojo of Enlightenment, now Ehime Prefecture, with 2 temples today, and these are 2 mountain temples. 2 local temples in the outskirts of Matsuyama City. And it's downhill all the way today from a pass into the suburbs of Matsuyama City. We might get a chance to experience this generous example of osettai. So part of the pilgrimage for many people is the giving of alms to pilgrims in the form of very often tea or sweets or citrus fruit. And we had the chance on this day to be invited into an old tea house by this lady who served us some local tea and gave us many, many bags full of mikan citrus fruits to take with us on our way. So today then, Temple 46, Joruriji, is the first of 3 temples, and these are very close to one another. Temple 47, Yasakaji. It's mentioned in the description on the Walk Japan website that this temple has an example of Buddhist hell and Buddhist heaven paintings, which are very interesting to stop and have a look at. And after visiting these temples, we head into the area of Matsuyama City known as Dogo, where we stay for 2 nights. And this area is known for its very, very famous onsen, Dogo Onsen. Here's an example of the lodgings tonight. And the first night at the hotel, we take dinner in the hotel restaurant, served on some absolutely beautiful dishes by extremely well-trained kaiseki chefs. And the hotel itself also has many baths that you can experience, indoor baths and outdoor baths. Day 8 then, because we stay at this hotel for 2 nights, there's no need to pack our luggage on this day. In the morning, we visit Temple 51, which is located very close to the hotel, before heading by bus to temples 44 and 45. So Temple 51, Ishiteji, is related to the story of Emon Saburo. So after meeting up with Kukai and apologizing for his transgressions, he he passed away. And just before doing so, he prayed that he might be reincarnated in the form of a wealthy man at some point in the future. And upon his deathbed, he's said to have clutched a stone while making this prayer. And a couple of centuries later, lo and behold, in the town of Matsuyama, a child was born clutching the same stone, who would eventually grow up to become a very wealthy merchant, and who spent his entire fortune on the restoration of what had become apparently quite a dilapidated temple. After visiting the temple there, we transit to the mountainous area of the Kuma Plateau, and head up to Temple 44, Daihoji. And today's walk is mostly through forests, occasionally coming out and walking through sections of farmland and through small hamlets such as this one, where we are met by our bus and where we can have lunch. Some scenes from what looks like May there of paddy fields. Before heading up onto the ridge that eventually brings us out to the back of Temple 45, passing some more lovely carvings of Buddhist deities and signposts. Some judiciously placed benches along the way to stop for tea break. More views out through the valleys, through this lovely section of red pine forest. And then we wend our way down to the back of the temple, which is the traditional pilgrims entrance. Past some more beautiful statuary to Iwaiaji, Temple 45. So Temple 45 is known as what's called a Sekisho Dera, this difficult to reach temple. In the past, one could only do so by climbing up and over this mountain pass along the ridge. Today, most visitors to the temple come by car or by bus, and they walk up from the car park, miss all those beautiful sights on the way down. This evening then, after visiting Temple 45, we head back to Doga Onsen, Matsuyama, and tonight is a free night for dinner. So couples or individuals or groups may wish to go off and have dinner in a local restaurant. The tour guide will, of course, give plenty of recommendations and perhaps help to order should that be necessary. Before doing so, you have a chance to dress up in a yukata and grab your towels and soap and whatnot and head to one of these traditional public bathing houses to rub shoulder with the locals and perhaps other pilgrims. This building that you can see, Doga Onsen, Doga Onsen refers to the area as a whole, but this building, especially the Yushinden, there you can see this beautiful copper-covered roof of the Yushinden, was for the exclusive use of Japanese emperors. And I think the last one to use it was about 70 years ago. But the building on the right is open to the public, and it's a place where after taking a bath, you can rent rooms and sit and enjoy a cup of tea, watch other bathers go by below. And it's where this gentleman on the right, Natsume Solseki, wrote a very famous novel called Botchan, amongst others. He was born in Tokyo in 1867 and moved to Matsuyama to teach and in a local school. And he wrote the novel Botchan sort of slightly based upon his own experiences there. And the plot centers on the relationships and intrigues that went on between the students and fellow teachers and describes the feelings and experiences of a well-to-do urbane gentleman who was sent to this perceived backwater. It's a very interesting book, and it is on the suggested reading list that we will share with you at the end of the talk. Then day 9 is another day that we visit a number of temples. There are 5 temples today. So we leave Doga Onsen and we head towards Zensuji, entering Kagawa Prefecture. So this is the final prefecture of the pilgrimage tour, entering the Dojo of Nirvana. We visit 5 temples in quick succession, the last of which is said to be the birthplace of Kobo Daishi. So in the morning, back on the road with our trusty bus driver for it's about a 2-hour transit eastwards. And we start the walk today at Iya Daniji. A few steps to warm the muscles up. There's some lovely views out across the Iyo plain, equally lovely on misty days as well as sunny days. Then the walk takes us today through these sections of bamboo groves, again through areas of farmland and past a number of reservoirs, some of which are said to have been constructed by Kobo Daishi, another of his many legends.
Hello, everybody. Just jumping in here as it looks as if we've lost the feed from Ben. We're working hard to get that back as soon as possible. Of course, I'm also aware that this is turning into a lengthy presentation. It's fascinating nonetheless, and if you can bear with us, we'll work hard to get back online as soon as possible from Ben. Thank you very much. Hello again, everybody. I think we're able to welcome Ben back at the moment. If we can make him the presenter, we can continue. There we go.
I'm sorry, some technical difficulties there.
Welcome back.
Okay, sorry about that. Some unexpected technical difficulties. Let me get back then, sorry, to where we were. So, heading onwards to Temple 72, Mandalaji, where we stop for lunch and perhaps during the spring, if the time is right, to experience the sakura cherry blossoms. We head to Temple 74, Koyamaji. It's one of my favorite temples of the day, actually. It's a very small temple, and you enter through a beautiful gate, and then you're met by these wonderful gardens, and you listen to the other pilgrims chanting the sutras, the smell of incense wafting by, and then as you leave the gate at the rear of the temple, heading towards 75, you're met by the sight of this giant crane from the adjacent quarry. And today, the morning walk ends with a visit to Temple 75, Zen-tsuji. So this temple complex is the largest in Shikoku, and it is on the site of what was purported to be the childhood home of Kukai. After visiting Temple 75, then we head towards the town of Kotohira, where we spend the evening. And the day begins with a visit to the Shinto shrine of Konpira-san, which is situated in the town of Kotohira. It involves a walk up a number of steps to the shrine buildings, which were featured earlier on in this picture of one of the 60 views of the provinces of Japan. So they're up to the inner shrine of Konpira-san. And this is a Shinto shrine. So it's not part of the 88 temple pilgrimage itself, but traditionally pilgrims and even modern day pilgrims like to take a break from the austere practices that they're undertaking to enjoy a visit to these shrines and the onsens that are associated with them. Now, this shrine is dedicated to seafarers, and there's this lovely collection of images, photos that were bought from shipping companies who, before launching new vessels, will come and seek a blessing from the Shinto Kanushi priests. An image of a Japanese astronaut there and his spaceship behind him. And some more lovely views out over these ancient volcanic peaks. Then our final walk to Temple 88 begins with a very gentle uphill section that eventually, for the last 20 minutes, brings us up to the top of a ridge. And you can see, judging by the angle of people's heads in these photos, just how challenging this little section is. And eventually, we reach the peak, and there's some amazing views out to the north across the inland sea before heading down into Temple 88 itself, Okuboji. So this is the final temple for many people, and pilgrims often choose to leave their staffs here after thanking Kukai for his spiritual and physical support all along the way. And it's here that we light our final candles and our final incense sticks, recite our final prayers, and perhaps receive our final stamps from the office. And although it's not quite the end of the tour, we still have the evening ahead of us, and we say goodbye the following day. I like to end the tour sort of officially at this spot besides this poster, and it represents footsteps of pilgrims on the island. And there's this lovely little phrase in Japanese at the bottom right-hand corner that says, "Hitori hitori no ashiato ga Shikoku no michi ni narimashita." So one by one, your footsteps, our footsteps, become part of the Shikoku way, the Shikoku Pilgrimage way. Then we head back to our hotel in Takamatsu, and we head out to a local restaurant in the evening for our final dinner together before meeting the next morning to say goodbye in the lobby of the hotel, where, of course, all Japan tour leaders will be available to help with onward travel arrangements. And it's here that I would like to say thank you for joining me today. And I apologize for the technical interruption towards the end of the talk there. If you have any more questions, I think we have some time now to answer them. And again, I'd like to thank you and pass you over to my colleague, Lou.